2017 was a strange time. While working night audit at a motel, I experienced the strangest individual on a weekly basis. The motel office was a large detached building with mostly windows and a glass door. I had security cameras on the building with all the rooms and along the back side of my building. It was the midst of summer, and I was working on some paperwork at about midnight. I peeked up at the furthest window in the room near the breakfast buffet. I noticed someone quickly moved out of view. I got a vague glimpse of a white-haired man, but didn't notice anything on the security cameras. I swiftly locked the doors. A few months rolled by, and I hadn't experienced anything of that white-haired man again. It was soon August of 2017. Late one night, at about 1 a.m., an older man comes in. I thought perhaps he was a guest, but he begins blabbering. "Hello, my name is John. You probably already know me. I'm so sorry. I can't believe you saw me. I must have scared you so bad the other night." I looked at him puzzled. He was beginning to freak me out, so I asked, "What are you talking about?" He looked a bit surprised and explained, "A few nights ago, you were walking out to your car, and I ran past you as well, naked. It's hard to explain." I was pretty creeped out at this point, but I humored him and let him ramble on, but didn't say much. He explained that on the weekends he liked to run around town naked as an adrenaline rush. He then said something that creeped me out more than ever. "I notice you have been working here 6 months or so. Sorry I never said hello before. You work quite a lot compared to the other girl. This strange naked man has been watching me every weekend for 6 months, and I never knew. Admittedly, I wasn't always the most alert, on my phone, on my laptop, taking a swift nap, but 6 months and I never noticed a naked man running through the parking lot. This began a routine of him coming back every weekend offering me gifts, or as my friends called them, bribes to not call the cops. He would come in every weekend and talk to me before his nightly streaking and bring me expensive candy or wine. It was strange how a little too expensive these gifts were, but he was a single old man with a good job. Soon rolled in October. Just like any weekend, he comes in and chats to me, grabs some coffee I usually made, and asks me about my week. He then explains he's going out for some drinks at a neighbor's house, and that he wanted to give me a bottle of champagne he had in his fridge. Being nice like I always tend to be, I agreed and thanked him. About 2 hours pass, and I hear a tap on the window. It's him, but he's naked. I look up on the camera, and no doubt about it, he's blatantly standing in front of the office naked. He keeps tapping the window and holds up the champagne for me to come get, but of course I'm very creeped out. He set it by the front door and waved. Thought he had left, so I walked out to grab it before a guest saw it laying there. But in fact, he did not leave. He stood there naked and trying to talk to me. I covered my eyes and said, thanks. I'm going inside now." The next night, he comes in and apologizes to me profusely, saying he had too much to drink. Him being so embarrassed, I never saw him again. After that, I wasn't sure if he was scared to talk to me because I didn't want to see him naked, or if he got arrested for running around naked. Because I worked there for so long, I get free rooms anytime I come visit. So next time I come to that motel, strange man, let's not meet again. It was the fall of 2007. I was 15, living in New York. I was a competitive athlete in high school, the type who got up before school for workouts and trained for long hours after. With recruiting season a year away, I was under tremendous pressure to perform in my sport as well as in the classroom. I was struggling to keep up in calculus at the time, so my mom suggested I get a tutor. She made an appointment with a teacher friend of hers who really knew his stuff. I'd been going to him regularly, probably 3 times a week for a month before I met Alex. Alex had the tutoring session after mine, and we'd cross paths every week. It had never been more than a glance and a smile, as I was incredibly shy and terrified of boys. He was tall, blonde, with piercing eyes, so naturally, I thought he was cute. One day, my tutor had to change his schedule and decided to book us together as we were learning the same topics in calculus. I was shocked and delighted when Alex started chatting with me afterwards and asked for my phone number. I had never had a boy pay attention to me in that way, and I was flattered that someone that cute wanted my number. Eventually, Alex and I began dating. Alex went to Catholic school in another town, but because he lived in the same town as I did, he took the bus every morning from my school to his. This gave us most mornings together, and he was able to meet my friends. I was a little taken aback when they didn't take to him like I did. They mentioned him seeming weird, and I got super defensive, but let it go. I realized that I'd been spending less time with them than I normally did and assumed they were jealous that I had a boyfriend. As time went on, things got more serious. We started experimenting sexually, and eventually I lost my virginity to him in the back of his Ford Escape. That's when things began to change. While Alex and I always talked regularly, he started getting over the top. He started getting over the top about staying in contact with me. He would make me stay on the phone with him all hours of the night, until eventually my mom started taking my phone before I went to sleep. This relationship also started to toll on my athletic career. I was too tired to spend my extra time training and started skipping my practices to see him, driving 30 minutes each way to his school. Eventually, my friend sat down and told me how unhealthy this relationship had become. I had isolated myself from them, and my entire free time was spent with him. At this point, I wanted so badly to end the relationship. I had fallen out of love with Alex, and college applications were approaching. I'd been scouted by no less than 10 colleges, and my plan was to attend Brown, my dream school. Alex's obsession with our relationship had taken a huge toll on his grades. Alex's obsession with our relationship had taken a huge toll on his grades, and Brown wasn't going to be an option for him. I remember when I told him that was where I was planning on going, and he freaked out, saying he would never get in there and begging me not to go. At the time, I was also recruited by the University of Illinois. Alex applied there in hopes that I would ditch Brown and go to Illinois with him. That was the final straw for me. I ended things for good with Alex, assuming that would be it. Because Alex would take the bus from my school to his every morning, I still had to see him. I remember walking into school past him and his classmates who took the bus with him, and some of his guy friends yelled "slut" and "whore" at me. Apparently, he had spread a rumor that I had cheated on him with a bunch of guys and then ended with him. I ignored it until I started getting Facebook messages from random people at his school. I spent months getting nasty messages from guys at his school accusing me of having STDs and telling me that I was going to get gangbanged by his friends. Eventually, I had to delete my Facebook because it wouldn't stop. I think deleting my Facebook was what set off the stalker tendencies for Alex. He wasn't able to see my face online, so he started calling non-stop and sending desperate AIM messages telling me he loved me. While this was going on, I was the favorite to win the high school championship in my sport. I'd gone undefeated all season. Alex ended up showing up while I was competing for the championship, and I saw him there. It shook me so badly I ended up losing the title. I was furious and heartbroken. I ended up picking up his call that came that night and screamed at him, telling him to never contact me again. That's when the threats began. I got a call a few nights later from Alex after he texted me. He had something important to tell me. Stupidly, I answered. He began to tell me how he was going to kill me. He was going to show up at my house when my parents were at work with a rope and a knife and make me suffer like I had done to him. I started to cry, and he eventually went on to say he was going to get me before I went into school, because he knew exactly where I parked every morning, and my parents were never going to find me. At this point, I had decided to record what was being said and had it taped on my phone. I hung up once I felt he'd said enough. The next morning, I went into school extra early, much earlier than I'd figured he'd be there. I showed my advisor the recording, who then called my mom. I remember feeling a deep-rooted shame as my mom listened to the recording, like I had done something to bring this on myself. My advisor was so alarmed by the recording, he advised me to go to the police. This day still feels surreal to me. My mom and I sat in the police station all day explaining the story of my relationship with Alex and how it got to this point. The police then drove to his high school and arrested him while he was in class. The topper on that day, though, was when I went out to bring food back to the police station for my mom and I pulled into the station at the same time as the car holding Alex did. I saw him in cuffs, and he indeed looked like he wanted to kill me. Post-arrest, I got a restraining order against Alex, and he was sent to a mental institution for a short while. He ended up breaking the RO on more than one occasion. I contacted the police, but they didn't think it was a cause to do anything. I think it's important to note that Alex's family was wealthy and had a name in the area, so it wouldn't have surprised me if that's why they brushed it under the rug. I ended up attending Brown and had to inform them of the RO and let them know that Alex should not be allowed on campus. It's been over 10 years since this happened, and I still continue to receive friend requests and phone calls from him on occasion. I recently moved across the country from where this occurred. I finally feel safe now that I am far from where he lives, but anytime I get a blocked call or text message from a number I don't know, a thought goes through my head that it's him. It's safe to say that this experience has completely changed who I let into my life and who I choose to date. Alex, let's not meet again. I was hanging out with my friends, just a typical Saturday night, and around 12:30 a.m. I went back to my friend's house just to smoke some weed. So after a bit, I decided to walk home from his house. It's only a few minutes walking distance away, so around 1:30 a.m. I start trekking in the cold and dark night to go home, but I wasn't too worried because the city I live in is pretty safe. When I'm about halfway home, a taxi van slows down and drives by me, going the same way I was. It makes a U-turn in front of me, drives by me again, honks, drives past me, makes another U-turn behind me, and this time they come up to a complete stop. I didn't get to see the driver, but the passenger was between a 25 to 30-year-old male and proceeds to shout, "Hey 60, you look hot. Want to come to a party?" Aside from the fact that this was creepy, I found it strange, for I was literally wearing my dad's sweater, my dad's jacket, plain black leggings, and big winter boots. I instantly freeze and think for a second maybe he thinks I'm a prostitute, but prostitution isn't common at all where I live, for it's not a big city, and it's a very cold night during this time of year. After about 20 seconds of us just looking at each other, and me frozen in fear, I can't think of what to do, but just kept walking home in hopes that they'll drive away. Of course, it didn't work out that way. They speed up and the man gets outside of the van and starts running towards me. I instantly take off, but running in deep snow boots is quite hard. So what do? I take off both of my boots, carry them, and continue sprinting for my life. I turn, and instead of going home, I'm just twisting and turning through the streets. While this guy is kind of staggering, I assume he was some sort of drug addict or alcoholic, and the taxi is speeding much faster. I can't think of what to do except run through the graveyard nearby, run to the forest behind it, and there I run along the paved trail in the forest until I get home, which took me longer, but I lost them. I rush inside, lock the doors and the windows. I sit in my living room all night with a knife in my hand. Why I didn't call the police, I don't know. I was still stoned, and so not really thinking clearly. Also, my mom wasn't in town, so I was home alone. I eventually fell asleep for a while, and when I woke up in the morning, I called the police and told them everything that happened. They didn't find anything, but said they'd get back to me if they did. I'm not sure why my parents allowed these guys to live with us now that I think about it, but the guy had always been nice to me and my brother, kind of like kooky uncles, and my dad had been friends with them since he was a kid. Anyway, when he left a book called Necronomicon. I was a kid, I didn't have a clue what it was. We were moving too, so my dad just threw it in the yard sale we were having. It's getting late in the day. Mom and Dad are packing what is left of the yard sale stuff away when this creepy guy walks up and just starts looking through the stuff. He's talking to himself and just looks like something out of an end of days movie. We'd seen him before, but he had never gotten this close. He picks the Necronomicon up and proceeds to tell my dad about how he is into the devil and wants to buy the book. The whole time, just eyeing me and my brother. My dad snatches the book from him and tells him to leave. He isn't selling the book to him. The guy gives him an odd stare, does his slow walk off, talk to himself thing. I'm a kid and forget about the whole thing right away. Fast forward to a week later, and the guy is back. Just come up to our door, knock. My dad opens it and he leans in and looks around, sees me, and his eyes just light up. Starts telling my dad that he saw a picture of me at this circus and he wanted to take me to see it. I'm a little kid, just excited at the idea of a circus and there being a picture of me there. I'm jumping up and down asking to go. My dad tells me there is no circus and there is no picture. Pushes the guy off the porch and tells him that if he ever comes near us again, he would kill him. We moved soon after that, but I still went to the same school. For a week straight, I noticed a girl I used to live with across the street from the trailer park wasn't at school. When I did see her again, she didn't look the same. She was quiet and withdrawn. Later, I found out that the very same man who had been trying to take me to the circus had molested her. I'm sorry if this is all over the place. It happened over 20 years ago, and Much of my childhood was crazy like this. I'm glad my dad was there, and to the man who wanted to show me my picture, I'm glad we never met again. When I was 17 years old, I was intrigued by computers and everything the internet had to offer. I soon found out about Yahoo chat rooms, back when they were used primarily. I would talk to a few people on there, including a friend I made which became a friend in real life, even to this day. So I didn't think anything bad would happen to me. No one ever thinks that, especially on the internet. I met this one guy named Daniel. At the time, he was 28 years old. Him and I became friends very quick, and I felt like I could tell him anything like I knew him forever. Our conversation would last forever, and I ended up telling him more than I probably should ever tell anyone. One of the conversations I had mentioned that I was trying to go to school to become a computer engineer and was trying to find a job in the field to better suit my understandings. He then told me he had his own computer company and that he was trying to find some help. As a naive woman who was trying to find work in her field, I wanted to take the offer. I talked to my family members about it, and despite their reasoning, I took the job offer. I will be the first to admit that my family were not strict at all. My mom did not like the idea, but she said that I was going to do it anyways, and that at least she knew where I was going. I probably would have been more grateful if she would have put her foot down. The job was located in New Jersey, and I lived in Texas. Fast forward to about 6 months later. This was when things went from good to worse. He was still trying to get his business off the ground, but kind of started slacking at it. To make extra income, I would help others that needed it with their networking and their computers. It was a way to get out of the house since I was not allowed to leave the house without his knowledge or consent. I just figured he was protecting me since I was still unfamiliar with the city. Once I turned 18 years old, things started to get even worse out of nowhere. When he would tell me how to eat my food and to be a proper lady. He would yell at me if I accidentally scraped my fork against my teeth and little things like that. He would hack into my laptop to keep an eye on me and see who I was talking to and what I was doing. Every time my family members would call me, I had to talk to them in front of him. Things started getting so bad that I started staying at work longer hours just so I didn't have to go home. I would never mention this to my coworkers because I didn't want them to pry into my business. It wasn't until later that they found out on their own. One of my coworkers has a huge crush on me and always worried about me when it was time to go home. He knew that I would rather work a double shift than go home, and that made him worried. I honestly wish I stayed in contact with him. He was one of the best friends a girl could ask for. I started getting into MMORPG games since they took me out of the reality I was living in at the moment. I met this guy on there, and it made me feel good to have someone to talk to finally. I never meant anything by it. It was just an escape. Daniel found out about the stuff I would say to him and said that I was cheating on him, which I never did such a thing. Until this moment, I never believed that he would go psychotic on me or even hurt me. I figured he would just yell at me and try to scare me. One day, he got so fed up with all of it and grabbed my cell phone and broke it in half. He looked at me and said, "Now you have no way to tell your family what you did to me." I was literally terrified at this point. He threatened me a little more, and I started crying. I figured that was the end of it, but I was completely wrong. The next day, I packed a small bag and told him that my job would allow me to do some footwork while it was slow. It was a bag of some clothes I could find in a hurry. I got to work and told my coworkers what was going on. They gave me a phone and I called my grandfather, who got me a flight to Texas as soon as he could. I was so grateful for him and everyone at work. When I got to the airport in Texas, I was greeted by my family members. I called Daniel and told him that I was in Texas and I didn't want to be with him anymore. He laughed and said, "There is no way you could have got back to Texas that fast. Come home, now." I assured him that I was not coming back to him. My mom got on the phone and told him the same. I don't know what him and my mom were talking about, but she got very angry and told him to never speak to me again and hung up. I wish I could say that that was the last time I ever spoke to Daniel, but it wasn't. My mom got a new phone to replace the one that Daniel had broken, and somehow Daniel got my number. He would call and threaten me. One time he called and my mom answered and put it on speaker. He said, "You better put her on a fucking plane back to New Jersey or I will come down there and get her myself." I almost had tears in my eyes even thousands of miles away. He still terrified me. My mom replied, "I will wait for you to come and get her. There is a body bag with your name on it." After that, the calls became less and he wasn't harassing me as much anymore. It took about 2 months for him to finally stop calling me, and I was able to move on with my life. I do not talk to people the same way I used to anymore, and I watch what I say to anyone now. I am a 27-year-old female, and this happened to me when I was 24. I lived in Los Angeles and have for my entire life. I was feeling lonely, so I decided to go on Craigslist and try to find someone to hang out with. Not necessarily to date, but someone to just chill with. If it led somewhere, then so be it. That was my thing. I emailed a few guys, one of which stood out to me. He sent me some pictures, and I was fine with how he looked and he seemed nice enough. We agreed to meet and go have coffee. It took him a lot longer than he said it would to get there, and once he did arrive, I instantly regretted what I was doing. But, being overly nice, I got in his car, and instead of heading to Starbucks as we planned, he drove to a CVS. I was like, what are you doing? To which he said he had to return some stuff to CVS so that he'd have money. I was super uncomfortable already and just wanted to get out of there, but again, my shyness got the better of me, and I just waited it out. Once he returned whatever it was he was returning, he then said he had to stop by his apartment. We pulled into this underground garage, and he said he'd be right back. You don't know how badly I wish I had run right then while he was gone, but I didn't. He got back in his car, and I could tell right away that he was high on something. Having been to rehab before myself, it was blatantly obvious. I told him that I'd gotten an emergency phone call while he was upstairs and that I was sorry, but I had to be taken back. I told him he could just drop me off at the nearest train station. I lived in a city like an hour away, so I wasn't about to have him drive me all the way home. We got on the freeway. That was the fastest route to the main stop. But we ended up passing the exit. I told him a few miles ahead of time which one it was, but he did not say anything. He just ignored me. I thought maybe he just hadn't heard me. "Hey, that was the exit, actually. You passed it," I said. Instead of pulling over to the right lanes, he kept pulling further and further over to the left until we were all the way in the far left-hand lane. I asked him what he was doing, trying to keep my cool. I can't honestly remember his exact words, but it went something along the lines of, "I'm not dropping you off. We are having sex. Why do you think I did this?" I looked at him with my jaw to the ground and asked him, "So, you are refusing to drop me off?" I asked him. "Yes," he said, and then he sped up his car. The first thing I thought was obviously calling the police, so I pulled my cell out. He turned towards me and hit me in the face hard, and I dropped my phone. because I was so shocked. The phone had fallen somewhere below his seat somewhere. I couldn't get to it. I was panicking. As we continued to drive, I tried desperately to think of what I should do. We came up on another interstate. For some reason, seeing the freeways intersect and seeing that we were about to get on yet another freeway was hugely ominous to me, and I decided I could not let him get on the next freeway. I couldn't get out of the car, so I did the only thing I could think of. I took a breath, grabbed the steering wheel, turning it as hard as I could to the right. He was so shocked he didn't even try to grab it back from me. As we crashed into one, then another car, and crashed into the side barrier. He turned towards me and started hitting me while screaming, "You fucking bitch! You fucked up everything!" I put my legs up to block the blows from his fist. I ended up falling backwards out of the car after managing to put my hand up and open the door. I ran to one of the cars we had crashed into that had pulled over behind us. The guy in the car had his phone out, presumably calling the cops. I knocked on his window screaming that this psycho tried to kidnap me, and he rolled it up all the way. I couldn't believe it. When I looked back, Psycho was coming towards me. So I said, "Fuck, clearly no one is going to help," and ran towards the fence, and was even weaker because of what had happened. So literally had to lean on the fence until it bent enough for me to fall over. Climbing up a chain link fence was not an option at that moment. Luckily, instead of him following me, he ran the other direction. He just left his car on the side of the freeway. Once I was over the fence, I realized that I was on the same horse trails that I was familiar with because I had worked at the equestrian center nearby. So I just walked through the miles of trails until I got into the nearest city, which is Burbank, and called the police from a bowling alley. I never found out what happened to that psycho. The cops never told me after I made the report, but I hope he got arrested for, trying to kidnap and rape me. So, crazy, sadistic psycho rapist. Let's never, ever meet again. So this is a few summers back. I was visiting a friend in Norway. He was a great host and took me out to Oslo. We were at the outdoor bar having a couple of drinks. Anyway, we were sitting there chatting and catching up. And I had to fly tomorrow, and he was my 6 a.m. ride to the airport. So we were very slowly nursing our drinks, and flying hungover is actually the 7th level of hell. As it gets later and later, the bar we are sitting at is getting more and more turned up. Lights go down, music ramps up, gets more and more crowded. We actually were about to finish up our drinks and head out. I see a couple of guys chatting up some very attractive young ladies directly across from me. Since it's an outdoor bar, a lot of people are smoking, which is weird considering Norway has some of the most incredible air quality ever. One of the guys takes out a cigarette and then asks the girl he is speaking to for a light. As she looks in her purse for the lighter, I see his hands flash out over her drink. It was a dark drink like Jack, so I couldn't be sure if he dropped anything in there. But I just thought better be safe than sorry. She hands him the lighter and picks up her drink. I interrupt my friend mid-sentence and go over there and say something along the lines of, "I think he put something in there." Neither of them speak English, so I have to enlist my friend to come over and explain it in Norwegian. The guy instantly gets defensive and tells me to mind my own business. Then he starts calling me names and says I'm racist. So my friends tell him if there's nothing in the drink, then swap with her. At first he protests, and then the young lady tells him that it's a great idea and puts the drink in his hand. He glares at us and pours it out on the floor. The woman had a look of shock on her face and left without saying anything, and the guy went into the crowd and disappeared before we could track down a bouncer. I live in a town in California. I can't tell you guys which one because I don't know if I'll regret it later or not. However, I can describe it. We're a very clean town, as in we never have any serious crime happen here, like murder or something awful that would land us in breaking news. However, when this happened, we for some reason didn't get on, even though it's a big deal. Everyone in my neighborhood know each other and genuinely trust each other. The people living in the house next door told my family that they would be out of town for a couple of weeks and wanted us to watch over their house while they were gone. It wasn't weird. They also gave us spare keys since they have pets in the house that they couldn't take on their trip and wanted us to feed them while they were gone. So they gave us the keys and head off the next day. The time that they were gone was normal. One of us would go over to the house and feed the pets and then leave. However, the day that they said they would be back, they didn't. Me and my family assumed that something happened with their car and that they needed time to fix it. The very next day, we find that they weren't back yet. We start to get a bit concerned, so my dad texts the neighbor's dad, but he doesn't respond. The next day, still not back. Soon, the other people in the neighborhood started noticing that they haven't came back yet. At this point, someone gets the authorities involved. They question people in the neighborhood, like where they said they were going, what car they were last seen driving in, and if any contact was made. Of course, I mentioned with my dad trying to text one of them, but not getting anything. I don't remember where, but they said they were going to Florida. A search party was made, both here and over in Florida. Days go by, nothing shows up. While this is happening, you would think that the news would be all over this, but no one comes over to report. Because of this, we have no clue where they are, or if anything new has shown up. They went on their trip in the summer of August, and now it's winter in January. I watched a lot of crime and case documentaries. I've never seen one where not only has not even one scrap of clues or evidence has shown up or not been reported by the news. I have a bad feeling that this isn't going to end well. Either they are found dead or alive, or they are never coming back. But I also feel like there is something bigger to this, like weird stuff is about to happen. I lived in a rural area, nothing but cow pastures and farms for miles. The nearest city was about 3 miles from where I lived. Living in this area, you either worked on a farm or you traveled the 3 miles into the city for work. I was a stay-at-home mother at the time, and nobody had ever bothered me or my family. My husband thought that we would be safe while he went to work at a small computer repair shop in the city. Oh, how I wish he would have been right. My son was only 3 years old at the time, and since we lived in a relatively secluded area, I thought that he would be safe while he played with the baby goats that we kept in the backyard. I should have known something was wrong when he came running through the back door one day screaming and crying about one of the baby goats being gone. He was very easy to calm down whenever he got worked up, but for some reason, today was not one of his good days. My husband was going to be working late tonight and wouldn't be home for several hours. Even though we lived in a secluded area, the phone calls from scammers and telemarketers were very frequent. Today was one of the days where the phone just rang non-stop. I was already frustrated with not being able to calm my son down, and the phone ringing wasn't making it any better. After the third or fourth call, I answered every call with an obvious tone of disdain. The tone of my voice seemed to end the rapid string of phone calls. All of a sudden, I hear the goats going absolutely crazy outside, so I had to go investigate. My son stayed in the living room, watching his cartoons and eating his favorite snack, Pop-Tarts and chocolate milk. I was sure that he would be safe while I was out back investigating whatever caused the goats to lose their minds. When I went outside, I saw a man standing in our pasture, just staring directly at my house. Of course, being the only one that was home with my son, I was immediately terrified. I ran back into the house and the man began to pursue me. When I got inside, I was able to lock the door before he could get in and call the police. It seemed like an eternity before the cops showed up to take the man away.
disturbing man that was terrorizing my animals. Let's never, ever meet again.
This happened years ago, but still affects me to this day. The summer after I graduated high school, I was still living at home. I was up late one night and was packing for a camping trip with my friends. It was unbelievably hot and had the window open as I sat and folded clothes. It was around 2 in the morning, and the next thing I knew, there was a hand coming through the gap in the screen of my window. I screamed, and the hand flew back. I was stunned, but there was a part of me that wondered if it was my younger brother pranking me. I got up and looked out the window and just saw the figure of a man staring back at me. I ran into my brother's room, and he was there playing video games. We called the police, who came and searched the area. They found nothing, warned me and my parents to lock the windows and doors, and left. We were all still shaken up, and my mom had a feeling that he would come back. It turns out our mother's intuition was right. She went outside and waited on our back porch. After 20 minutes or so, she saw a man, dressed in black, slink into the backyard along the tree line. He hid behind a tree for a few seconds and ran to the other tree and hid there, slowly working his way toward my window. My mother yelled something to him, and he took off running. The police came back out, and again, found no trace of him. I opened the window again, not even the curtains. My parents installed some motion detecting lights, and that seemed to be the end of that. About 6 months later, my friend and I got an apartment downtown together. We were really excited. This was our first place on our own. The apartment wasn't exactly the best quality, but it was so fun to be living in the city. The downside was that it was street parking only. After a few weeks, my car was broken into. Nothing was taken but a single rose sat on the passenger seat. It was creepy, but I vowed to be vigilant and safe. I always tried to park close to the entrance, near the lights. But often it was difficult to get those spots, and I would often have to park further away on darker streets. Things quickly began escalating at this point. My car was broken into at least once a week. Most of the time, a flower was left, but once a pair of men's underwear was left. And even more creepily, once a bag of Tootsie Rolls, as they were my favorite candy. This made me wonder if the person knew me personally, and I started to become suspicious of everyone. There was laundry in the basement of the apartment, and one day I went down to get a load that finished drying. As I started to fold, I realized all of my undergarments, bras and panties were gone. Another week, and I had a male friend over from high school, and his tires got slashed during the visit. By the time the first letter arrived, I had already started making plans to move elsewhere. The letter described a love for me that had been going on for years. He noted things that proved he had been watching me closely. I was able to arrange for another friend to take over my lease and moved in with another friend on the other side of the city. It was a secure building and had an underground parking garage that was only accessible to tenants. I felt much more secure, and the extra money spent was well worth the peace of mind. Things were quiet for a few months, and then my roommate got a boyfriend. Most of us were weary of Ashley's new boyfriend from the beginning. For one, They met on MySpace after he reached out to her. Another reason was that new boyfriend, Matt, was extremely good looking. And while Ashley was a wonderful person, she just wasn't the type. She just wasn't the type you would typically expect someone like him to date. Ashley was thrilled. She had never had a boyfriend and really felt like he was a Prince Charming. I thought he was weird and creepy from the beginning. Matt was on the quiet side and always seemed to be sporting an uncomfortable, lingering smile. It was difficult to carry on any sort of conversation with him because he would always make it weird with some random facts that were completely unrelated to what we were talking about. I had deleted my MySpace when the initial stalking began, but I created a dummy account to learn more about Matt. It didn't look like he really knew any of his friends in real life. There was only pictures of himself, and the rest of the information was vague. My friends and I gently tried to discourage her from seeing Matt. He technically hadn't done anything wrong, but he was just so strange. She would immediately get defensive and would shut the conversation down. Matt started to spend more time at the apartment, and I found myself finding any excuse I could to avoid coming home. One day, I came home from work and found Matt on my couch alone, drinking a beer. Ashley had been called into work and she told him he could just hang out. I was furious because I didn't want to spend any time with him, so I grabbed a beer and a snack and headed off to my room and shut the door. About 30 minutes or so, he knocked on my door and suggested we watch some TV and get to know each other better because we both loved Ashley. I didn't want to, but decided that maybe I needed to give it a try. He put on a movie, and I tried to just focus on the movie because I didn't want to talk. At one point I glanced over to Matt, and he was staring at me with a smile on his face. I snapped a "what" at him, and he just continued smiling and said, "I just can't believe it." "Believe what?" I asked. He said nothing and went back to watching the movie, still smiling. I had no idea what he was talking about, but the interaction had every hair standing up on my body. I excused myself and locked the door to my room. Another month or so went on, and I had managed to avoid being home for much anything beyond sleep and showering. Matt practically lived there and had even brought a bunch of his things to Ashley's room. I really didn't want to move again, but was beginning to look for other options. On their 6-month anniversary, I saw a huge banquet of flowers on the table, and an already opened card popped up next to it. I rolled my eyes and was about to leave when I decided to see what the weirdo wrote to her. When I opened the card, my heart started beating through my chest. The handwriting was exactly the same as the one my stalker had sent. I kept them as evidence and dug them out of my desk for comparison. The handwriting was unique and identical. Matt was the stalker. I called the police first. As they were on their way, I called Ashley and asked her to come over. She was at work but said she would be there when she could. I was terrified to tell her because I knew she would be shattered. The police took a statement from me and actually went to Ashley's work to get more information from her, and they ended up breaking the news. Apparently Ashley called Matt and left a furious message, even though the cops told her not to say anything, and he completely disappeared after that. There was no Matt or anyone matching his resemblance at the place he said he worked. Ashley had never been to his apartment because he said he had been staying with friends while trying to save money for a trip to Europe. His family lived out of state. She had never met a friend of his because he said they had a falling out because he was choosing to spend so much time with Ashley. It was all lies, and in the end, she was dating a stranger. We don't even know if Matt was his real name. The cherry on top of all this whole thing was when we went through Matt's things. He had left everything when we disappeared, and Ashley and I decided to go through everything. There was a duffel bag that was full of gym clothes, but in one of the compartments, there were about 10 pictures of me. All of them were taken from far away, with the exception of one of me sleeping. The sheets were current, so I know it had to have been at the current apartment. Before I started locking my bedroom door, a few pictures dated back to before the incident at my parents' house, which made us think that was him as well. The 2 pairs of my missing underwear were there, and I shuddered to think what he did with the rest. A Starbucks lid with my red lipstick marks, a necklace I hadn't even noticed missing, a few other random sick souvenirs. The police never tracked him down. I decided to accept an opportunity overseas that I hadn't been considering and got the hell out of there. Unfortunately, Ashley and I quickly drifted apart. She had a really hard time accepting that her first love was a complete psycho. I think I had some underlying anger for believing all of his lies and letting him into our lives. I don't know what his end game was. Would he have tried to hurt me? Or was he simply content with being in my world? I'll never know. Being stalked changes you. Even when I lived across the world, I looked over my shoulder everywhere I went. I still have no social media accounts attached to my real name. I am married with children and know that he moved on to torment some other poor woman. But every time I visit my hometown, I am tense and keep a low profile. Part of me will always worry that Matt will resurface again. Alright, if you enjoyed the video, go ahead, like, share, subscribe. Thank you for watching.